And good evening. Welcome to Counsel of the Day with Shanrae. I'm Shanrae, and we are on week 2. This week is going by so fast. Week 2, part 2 of violence exposure to violence or violence exposure in the family. And so let me go to my comments. I am on. Good evening, Dee Dee. Good evening. I'm on 3 different platforms: YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So I'll be looking in different directions. This is an open forum, so if you have any questions, if you have any life scenarios, I will pause and I will take out time and we will go over this on tonight. So we want to go on and get started because this 30 minutes is going to come and go quickly. Again, welcome to Counsel of the Day with Shanrae. I am Shanrae. All right, so let me move this along, and I'm going to open this up a little bit so you all can see these PowerPoints. I am a degree counselor, and let me open up my bio so you all can see this. All right, I'm going to actually do it this way because I'm reading from here. So I'm a degree counselor who've acquired my dual BS degree, Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology and organizational management from Ashford University. Okay, my great passion is bringing healing to people who have been through a traumatic or stressful experience. And so when human beings experience trauma or severe life stressors, it's not uncommon for their lives to kind of unravel. But I help clients who include children, adults, and families to find healthy adaptations of themselves and strengthen their relationships so they can know themselves as peaceful, complete, whole, and safe. All right, let's move this along. I'm going to keep it blowed up. Let me read my website disclaimer. And I'm going to open it this way just a little bit. Please be aware that due to the nature of the technology that I'm using, there can be no assurance of confidentiality when using this online service. It should also be noted that due to changes in policies, that all replies are to be used as advisory and informational only and will not constitute an official determination. Information provided by myself or other counselors or counseling services are subject to the limitations of current and available material, but the final responsibility for successfully achieving a goal rests with you, the individual. Information online is designed to be helpful. However, this information does change frequently, and it is recommended that clients or yourself, individuals, will consult another physician, another specialist, and or religious leader to aid you in your overall behavioral wellness. All right, so let me move this along. I am a Christian counselor. So my scripture I chose for this month, this quarter, comes from Luke chapter 12, verse 48, the amplified version. And it says that for everyone to whom much is given, of him shall much be required. Or those that are kind of accustomed to the Bible, the King James version says, to whom much is given, much is required. All right, so let's move this along. Again, we're on part 2 of violence exposure and the family. Let's go over our definitions. And I'm sorry, my PowerPoint turned out a little awkward when I uploaded it here. So please excuse the typos. Let's go over exposure. The definition that I chose for exposure is the state of being exposed to contact with something, not just someone, but with something. Then we have family. I chose the definition of family. It says a group of one or more parents and their children that are living together as a unit. And then I have two different definitions for violence. Number one, it says behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. Number two, strength of emotion or an unpleasant or destructive natural force. So those are the two definitions I chose to speak about to define violence. All right, so let's move this along because this 30 minutes. Good evening, Miss Barbara. Good evening, Mike. Hey, Mike. Hi, Mike. Good to see you. That's my brother-in-law, Mike. Good to see you. And we're so glad to have look like we have Dee Dee. I think we have Miss Desiree Dee Dee Scott on this evening as well. All right, so let's move this along. Tonight's key points. All right, and I hope you can see it. And y'all talk to me. I'm gonna be looking. I will stop and pause. Tonight's key points are: number one, what is cognitive processing theory? Number two, cognitive processing theory versus exposure theory. That's what we talked about last week, exposure theory. Number three, 4 steps or techniques of cognitive processing theory. Number 4 is benefits of cognitive processing theory. Number 5 is how to get help with cognitive processing theory. And then, of course, we'll have a takeaway if we have time for that on tonight. So let's move this along, guys, because we got a lot. I got a lot to squeeze in, with a little bit of time. All right, so let me open this up very quickly. Number one, what is cognitive processing theory? All right, so cognitive processing theory. Good evening, Dee Dee. Cognitive processing theory is a cognitive behavioral treatment focused on helping people who are stuck. And that's everybody. We're not pinpointing just one person. Everybody has been stuck in their life. But this is a treatment that helps people that are stuck in their thoughts about maybe a trauma that they experienced. It was developed by Dr. Patricia Rezick, and she's a PhD, and other psychologists to treat post-traumatic stress disorders. Okay, this study originated from cognitive theory. Now I'm going to go down. Cognitive theory was developed by Jean Piaget back in 1896, and he did his studies between 1896 and 1980. So this cognitive processing therapy came out of cognitive theory study, which is a very long-term theory study. All right, so CPT, or cognitive processing theory, is based on the idea that post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms stem from a conflict between pre-trauma beliefs about the self, about one person's self, and maybe the world, and post-traumatic information. For example, a pre-trauma belief could be that the world is a safe place and nothing bad will happen to me, while post-trauma information may suggest that the world is in fact a dangerous and a hazardous place to live. And so these conflicts are called stuck points, and are addressed through various techniques, such as writing about your traumatic event. Now, I talked about on Tuesday, we had Cole on, and he asked the question about how can you start the process of kind of retraining your brain from maybe a traumatic event that you encountered. And I talked about the ladder list. And this is one of the things that they're talking about. The ladder list is writing down whatever negative thought that's in your head. Write down the opposite of that. Write it down and then put it up and just continue to rehearse that. Look at it. Say it to yourself every day. It's a retraining, a reframing of your brain. Okay, so it says your therapist, or whatever therapist that a person decides to go to for this cognitive processing therapy, the therapist will help you identify and address your stuck points. Okay. And errors in thinking, including thoughts like I'm a bad person, or I did something to deserve this. That was the one example that I asked Cole on Tuesday night. I said, if you have the thought in your mind that I deserved what happened to me, you tell me what the opposite of that is. And he did. He did. And so the therapist is going to help you identify and address your stuck points and the errors in the thinking, including, and I already said what they was. So your therapist may help you address these errors or these stuck points by having you gather evidence for and against those thoughts. Again, like I said, a good way to start is the ladder list by, writing down the list. I don't suggest writing down the negative thoughts. What I suggest is let's just jump to the positive, y'all. Let's jump to the positive. Hey, Mike. Okay, let's just jump to the positive. Okay, if you're thinking, oh, I deserve what happened to me, start writing down the opposite. I deserve to be treated well at all times. I deserve to get the same treatment. If I treat people well, then I deserve to get that same treatment back. Always, start with the positive. So let's move on to the next thing. The next thing, I'm gonna blow this up just a little bit, and then we're gonna okay. What does cognitive processing therapy involve? All right. So here it says cognitive processing therapy is one specific type of cognitive behavioral therapy. It is a 12-session psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress disorder patients. So cognitive CPT, I'm going to make it CPT, teaches you how to evaluate and change the upsetting thoughts that you have had since your trauma. And by changing your thought pattern, reframing, retraining your brain, you can change how you feel. So now let's talk about, because last week we talked about exposure therapy being a great therapy to help retrain your thought pattern if you experience some, childhood traumas or life traumas. So it says cognitive, and let me move this along so y'all can see this. All right, and I'm gonna blow it up just a little bit. Cognitive processing therapy versus exposure therapy. All right, so it says that similar to exposure therapy for PTSD, CPT provides people with information on PTSD and helps them confront unpleasant memories, memories and thoughts associated with a traumatic event. However, unlike cognitive processing therapy, exposure therapy doesn't always assist people in addressing these errors in thinking. So in CPT therapy, your therapist will help you confront your fears, your fear thoughts and memories associated with a traumatic event. They will also assist as you learn the correct maladaptive, that's a theory term, maladaptive or unrealistic or problematic thought patterns that may be driving your PTSD symptoms. All right, so I wanted to show y'all this so you can see this. Let me move this along. Let me blow this up. Exposure therapy. These are the things that exposure therapy does. I can hardly see y'all. Okay, but it addresses abuse. It addresses neglect. It addresses all kinds of traumas, right? And let's move this along. Okay, so cognitive processing therapy it's often first choice of they say it's the first choice of treatment, especially when addressing the long-term effects of childhood traumas. Childhood traumas. Most of us have childhood traumas. I don't know anyone that don't have a childhood trauma. Okay, so that let's just take the elephant out the room. That's normal. Most people have some childhood traumas. Okay, it's just learning how to get over them. So but some people really do have severe PTSD behind it. And so the American Psychiatric Association, or the APA, recommends treatment over 12 sessions when people do the cognitive processing therapy. All right, so let me open this back up. All right, I'm going to do a side note right here. Let me blow this up for 1 minute. I'm so happy to have my sister on here, Miss Dee Desiree Scott, and we're going to open this up. We were having a discussion, she and I. We were having a discussion earlier this week about this quarter session when it comes to traumas. And so this is the side note that I wanted to put in here. So we wanted to say, when you're personally being exposed to something that is unfamiliar, we all have experienced unfamiliar settings, unfamiliar things. Our response to this unfamiliar experience is going to determine whether we're going to grow or we're going to be stagnant. Okay, so let me open this up just a little bit. So Desiree and Dee Dee Scott was talking from experience. She was life experience, and she's lived long enough to have a good amount of experience. So so have I. But she talked about what she decides to do in an unexpected or and being exposed to an unusual experience. She's like, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. And I laughed. She said, I'm just going to walk through it. Whether we don't honestly know the outcome, but she decides to walk through it. It's uncomfortable because we don't know what we're walking through. And a lot of times, experience is the best teacher. But she said that she chooses to walk through it. And so we started talking about, and let me see if I can blow this up just a little bit more. We started talking about, do people, what do people normally do in these situations? Do they normally retreat and run from these type of uncomfortable situations, or do they press forward and embrace the exposure to the unfamiliar? Now I'm going to open this up a little bit. This question is for you, the viewers, tonight. Dee Dee said, let the healing begin. I know that's right. This question, and guys, I'm going to be looking in the comment section. You don't have to get too personal, but the question is out there. What do you do in an unfamiliar situation? Do you, and it's okay to be honest, because everybody at some point has done the same thing. Either run from the situation or faced it head on. So the question out there is, what do you do? Those that are viewing today, how do you handle uncomfortable or unfamiliar situations? Do you run from them, or do you embrace them? And I'm going to look for your comments, and I'm going to pause, and we're going to go from there. And I'm going to come back because I did a little bit more research on different ways people respond to the unfamiliar. So let me try to get back, and I'm going to jump right back in. What time is it? Okay, I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to be going quickly with this. These are some techniques to help get you through the cognitive processing therapy. So it's a highly structured treatment approach, which consists of 12 weekly sessions, each around an hour in length. So they only give you 60 minutes, an hour. Desiree said a combination of both. Some people actually do a combination of both. Like initially they run, and then they stop and say, you know what, this ain't gonna get me nowhere. And then they turn around and say, I gotta face this. So Miss Barbara said a little of both. Okay. See, all of this is normal. It's normal, but and we're gonna move back onto this. All right. So these sessions sometimes can be group sessions, one-on-one sessions, or combined group and individual formats when it comes to this type of therapy, CPT. Then they have psychoeducation. That's another step in this, where your initial sessions will deal with psychoeducation about PTSD and the CPT approach. Your therapist will likely ask about your symptoms and talk about your goals for treatment. They will go over the ways in which your thoughts about your trauma impact your emotions and your daily experiences. Okay. Understanding your thoughts and feelings. Okay, so next you're going to learn to become more aware of what you think and feel about your trauma, how you may be stuck in beliefs that are hurting you. You'll work with your therapist to identify and analyze your stuck points. And you may be asked to write an impact statement that explores your thoughts and beliefs about the trauma. The statement will talk about why you think the trauma occurred and the ways you believe it has affected your life. Not every CPT therapist will ask you to write an impact statement, though, but they will ask you to think about your trauma and its effects. So if you're engaging in group therapy, you won't have to read your impact statement aloud in front of other people. You may share it with your therapist individually, and they may only ask that you revisit it yourself in private throughout the treatment. So in addition to the impact statement, the therapist may also ask for the client or the individual to write down detailed accounts of the traumatic experience. And these accounts will include sensory details that you remember, in addition to your thoughts and your feelings. I'm looking for responses. All right, learning new skills. I'm trying to blaze through this so we can get back to the pros and the cons. Learning new skills. So in this phase, the individual learns how to question and challenge their thoughts and feelings and explore how they would prefer to think about the trauma. Their therapist will go over common thought patterns that people with PTSD experience, and then will teach them cognitive coping skills. All right, so they may ask them to look for evidence for or against the beliefs uh, about the trauma, and they will likely fill out worksheets during this part of the treatment, either in therapy or afterwards as homework. And as I say, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. That's what I follow, because I believe in doing strategies, doing homework, doing hands-on things to overcome, to help overcome whatever the person may be experiencing. All right, changing your beliefs. This is another part of technique, a part of the CPT theory. Find a therapist. Finally, they'll learn how it's common for a person's thoughts and beliefs about the world to change after a trauma, and they will learn how to balance the way that they saw the world before and the way that they see it now. The therapist will focus on helping them in 5 different areas in their life where people with PTSD commonly encounter issues. Like number 1, in their esteem, self-esteem. Number 2, intimacy. Number 3, power or control. Number 4, their safety, and then trust. So these are the 5 different ways that the therapist will help them to reclaim. Good evening, Jamel. Reclaim their power and their thought patterns. So before concluding treatments, the therapist is going to ask the client to rewrite their impactment statement, compare it with the original one, and then the therapist may also discuss future areas that may pose problems, and together they'll develop a plan for managing these possibilities if they occur. I'm going to stop here. We're going to go back to the question that was posed. Thank you, Miss Barbara. Hey, Kavia, how you doing? Hi. We're going to go back to the question that we asked. I'm going to go right back to this. Let me blow this up so y'all can see this. This is the side note. All right. It says, when you're personally being exposed to something unfamiliar, your response to this unfamiliar experience will determine your growth or your stagnation. The question I asked was, number 1, how do you handle a situation that's the unfamiliar? Do you normally retreat and run from the situation, or do you press forward and embrace this exposure to the unfamiliar and grow from it? So this is the question that I've asked, and I'll wait for your response. Okay. So Miss Barbara said, hey, Miss Barbara said that she does a little of both. So she runs and then she faces it. Dee Dee said she runs and then she faces it. Annette, whatever response you give, trust me, it's normal. It's normal. So I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait to hear from the rest of the viewers if you feel free enough to share. There's no pressure at all. I wanted to read this to you. Now we know for a lot of us that's lived long enough, Kavio said he presses forward and retreats depending. Listen, I'm from New York, so let me tell you this. New York rats, if you ever get confronted by a New York rat, you better run. You better use some common sense and run. That's something something you don't want to face. Is it something like that? But as far as being exposed to a situation, a life situation, that's what I'm talking more about. A life situation. Do you run or do you face it? Okay. All right, Kate, you'll say, yep, that's right. That's right. I wanted to read this. We know, a lot of us know from experience, as uncomfortable as it is, in order to grow in life and to move forward, the best option is to, even if you take it in steps, is to face whatever situation is happening. Face it. If you have to take it in small increments to deal with it, do that, but face it. I did a little research very quickly about what a lot of people, they do the opposite. They'll run and they'll retreat from it. Let me see. So this is called learned helplessness. And it says here's a concept in psychology called learned helplessness. It's used to explain certain aspects of depression and anxiety. It's fairly old, having been first recognized and codified in the 1970s, but has remained largely relevant and accepted within the theorist field. Um, okay, in the theorist field, the name mostly explains it all. If at a very early stage in development, a living thing comes to understand that it is helpless in the face of the world's forces, it will continue to perceive a lack of control and therefore actually become helpless no matter if the context changes. All right. So when we're faced with something, we have two options, and I'm going to break this down. It's called the fight or flight. Fight or flight. Either you're going to go into fight mode or you're going to go into flight mode, just depending on the situation. And depending on the situation, if you go into flight mode, then that's the right thing to do. If depending on the situation, like I was talking about that New York rat, if you ever encounter New York, you better run. You better run. That's all I got to say. Them things can chew through steel, so they'll chew through you. So, all right, but it's natural. It's a natural thing that happens to everybody. The fight or flight syndrome. Let me read this. People who have adopted, okay, let me go up. A response to conflict when faced with stress and acute threat, our bodies enter, like I said, a fight or flight mode. It's supposed to be automatic. And so the adrenal cortex releases stress hormones to put the body on alert, and the heart begins to beat more rapidly. Breathing increases frequency, your metabolism starts to speed up, and oxygen rich blood gets pumped directly to the larger muscles in your body. The point is to become energized, to prepare to face the source of the conflict head on, or at worst, be ready to run away at top speed. People who have adopted the learned helplessness theory, the learned helplessness, begin to have feelings of a slow, oozing onset of sleep. Okay, so this is a different type of flight. Some people run, but this is what some other people do. A sleepiness that overtakes the body slowly but surely and feels entirely outside of their control. So, this is something that the person they have adapted early on in their lives. Okay, so what the person does in a stressful situation is they go to sleep. That's their way of escape, going to sleep. So therapist John Sharp, he says, and he's a Harvard Medical School theorist, he said this is something that's really outlived its adaptive value. He said as an adult, people start to think, I should have control over this current situation, but I don't. And so at first glance, sleep might seem like the quintessential avoidance, like burying their head in a pillow or in the sand. But don't feel as though they're not helping themselves. So after all, going to sleep isn't like turning the lights off. The truth is that there's a lot still going on while their eyes are closed, and while they might be able to temporarily stave the flow of conflict by falling asleep, they're not really escaping anything. In fact, sleep in some ways forces them not only to relive the emotional experience, but to process and concretize. He said concretize it. By going to sleep, they may be making the fight with whatever or the emotional trauma more real. So some people, Desiree Didi said, wow, so true. I don't know if some of y'all ever experienced this or been around someone who does this, but this is serious. This is it's called learned helplessness symptoms. Some people, that's their flight. That's their flight pattern. They just go to sleep. There are so many different ways to avoid stuff, to avoid things. And it's okay, because once you understand that maybe that's not the best outcome for dealing with something that's out of your control, then you can learn how to retrain yourself. I don't have time this evening to keep going into it, but I am going to address this a little bit more next week about how adults deal with stressors, and how the whole root of everything, it comes from childhood traumas. And it's going to actually open up some things about how people do. Like, I'm from New York City. Dee Dee's from California. So, and then I grew up in the inner cities. She grew up in the inner cities. We both are kind of very similar when it comes to the unfamiliar. We're both kind of very similar. We both go into that fight mode. And that's because that's how that comes from childhood. You know, I had to fight in order to survive. And so, but I had to learn when I moved out of New York City and moved down south. I had to learn actually by being embarrassed. I had to learn that that fighting, that wasn't the answer, and that was, that wasn't the answer, or that confrontational type of thing wasn't the answer. And I had to learn how to relax and retrain my brain and retrain. Desiree said, "Fight you quick." I'm telling you, it's that fight or flight, fight or flight. And but that's how we was, in the environment that we grew up to, where the first reaction was to defend yourself. Defend yourself, defend yourself. So the training goes a couple of different ways. I had to retrain myself years ago when I moved down to Georgia, that fighting was not the first response for everything. There was a such thing as sometimes just communicating verbally, or just walking away and letting it go, because it's just not that serious. I had to learn how to bring it down and calm down, because I was in a better environment. But that retraining, I mean, it was just like normal. If somebody cut me off in the parking lot at Walmart, I would find me a different, and I'm not proud of this, and y'all know I'm an open book. I would find me a different parking space and go find that person in the Walmart and confront them. that was years ago. That was that automatic fight. But I had to learn how to retrain my thought pattern. I had to learn how to cope and deal with unfamiliar situations in a more of a favorable type of way, and a more of a mature, I would say, in my case, more of a mature type of way, and then more not and less barbaric. How I grew up initially. Again, you had to defend yourself, but I moved into a better environment where we can talk it out, or we can just ignore them and keep going. And so that's growth. Everybody. Desiree said, "Oh Lord." Yes, Miss Barbara. She said, "More wisdom." Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And again, the longer we live, the more we're exposed to, the more that we encounter, we learn. Experience really is the best teacher. We learn how to deal with the unfamiliar. Again, me as a therapist, a degree counselor, I constantly say anybody can overcome any situation that they've experienced in their life. It takes steps, some more steps than others, but I know that any and everybody can overcome whatever traumatic experience that they have experienced, and overcome it for the better. For the better. And so we're at the end of it. I will see y'all next week. We're gonna open up a little bit more about this uh learning this learned helplessness symptoms. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about it in relationships next week. So I'm going to move this along. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. No, we have run over. Oh my God, I didn't realize I had so many. Woo. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move this along. All right, let me open this up just a little bit. If there is a past, hold on, let me read from my notes. Excuse me. So if there's a past Counsel of the Day with Shanrae series that you've missed, or you just want to rewatch, you can go to my YouTube channel at Shanrae Price. Please like, share, and subscribe, and select any past series that you would like to watch. Also, I am a professional one-on-one counselor, and I offer a professional one-on-one counseling services. So if you're interested in it, feel free to contact me via Facebook Messenger at Shanrae Cherie Price, or via my email address at shanraecherieprice@gmail.com. I'm a lifestyle strategist, and my aim is to aid you in your life's goals and your life's dreams. All right. Thank you for participating in week 2, part 2 of Counsel the Day with Shanrae, my second quarter of 2022, May 22. Exposure. That's what we'll be talking about all week long. All month long is exposure. I will see y'all next Tuesday. We're going to open up about exposure as adults, and how to overcome some certain primary things that have been adapted, and how we can move past it and have a successful, happy, healthy life and relationships, because we're going to be talking about relationships next week with this. All right, have a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend. I want to thank you personally, Miss Desiree Dee Scott. Let me ask you really quick before we go off, did you want to come on and say something before I go? Because we both went over this theory together, and she gave me so many wisdom points. Do you want to come on briefly, Dee Dee? I'm waiting for your response. If she's still here, I was going to send her a link. Okay, she might be gone. All right, well, is she gone? I'll see y'all next week. All right, good night, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Good night. Oh, she eating. I'm sorry, Dee Dee. Okay, good night, y'all. Bye-bye.